Hello, I am Rabbi Elisheva Sachs. I am really privileged to teach a number of Hebrew students as well as the Bar and Bat Mitzvah kids. And it's really fun to be here in a different context to give you a little bit of interpretation of Torah to talk about this week. So I want to remind us, we started out a few weeks ago in Egypt, slaves, things were bad. There was a pharaoh who didn't know the Jewish people, who was trying to kill them by putting them into the water. And instead of that becoming a way of doing away with all of these powerful people, it became the seed of salvation for these people. So I want you to hold that idea of things looking like they're one way and then switching into another way, because that's where we're going to end up. As you know, Moses is appointed as the leader, and he returns from his appointment to Egypt and gets started with Pharaoh and the plagues. And so for the past 2 weeks, we've had plagues in the region where the Egyptians were living, but not where the Jews were living. At the end of this time, Moses asked the Jews to gather together and to ask their neighbors for gold and silver and precious things. Their neighbors are happy to give these to them. This does make you wonder a little bit about the nature of the relationship between the everyday Egyptians and the Jews, rather than the nature of the relationship between Pharaoh and the Jews. But let's just say that the Jews are now poised with riches on their shoulders and prepared to leave, and yet they're not, because they never really believe it's going to happen. And we know this because it's only at the last minute that they bake their bread, not giving it enough chance to let it rise, even though we're told to eat as if we were leaving Egypt. Leaving Egypt was the state of being prepared and not being prepared. Now, into our parsha, God takes them around in a sort of indirect way, lest they run into a warlike experience, which is not what God wants for them. And they camp at the shores of the sea. As we know, Pharaoh returns to recapture them, to bring them back, to check and see if they are really worshiping as they had said. It's actually not clear what Pharaoh is doing. His heart is hardened. He is there with 100 chariots. This is 200 horses. You can just imagine them arrayed and coming down to get these slaves and bring them back, and the fear and terror that must be taking place. Now, the midrash, of course, knows the story, as do we. And so the midrash has two fascinating takes on this moment in the experience of the Jews. Take number one, I think you mostly know. It's the story of Nachshon ben Aminadav, who sees the Egyptians arrayed and coming towards them and says, there's no way we can do this unless we get into the water. And he starts to walk into the water, and he goes up to his knees, and he goes up to his waist. We're going to play the game, yeah? And up to his armpits, and up to his shoulders, and up to his chin. And then just as the water is rising above his nose, that is what causes the sea to split. That's Midrash 1. Midrash 2 is that everybody knew that the minute somebody went into that water, it would part. So we had, once again, just like on the night of the Passover, the knowledge that preparedness was good, but not quite the preparedness yet to do it. And that all of the leadership was fighting to see who could be that first one. This does not include the story of Nachshon. And so they're on the shore, and they're throwing sand and rocks at each other, and the Egyptians are coming, and Moses says, oi. And he reaches, this is at the point where he reaches his staff out and parts the sea. But those are both a midrash, because actually neither of those things happen. Yes, Moses holds his staff over the ocean, and yes, the sea does part, but it takes overnight. And so there is the protection of the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke that are behind the Jews, not allowing the Egyptians to see where they are. And that is what gives the sea its chance to split. I highly recommend, by the way, the video of the sea splitting in Prince of Egypt. It's just gorgeous. And it gives a lovely midrash on this as well. It's a little bit different. So in our first part, we have these two midrashim that sort of unusually don't really answer a question in the text, which is how did the sea part? It's clear how the sea parts in the text. We have this additional piece. And I'm going to suggest that the rabbis have given us these midrashim to remind us of the importance of getting into something ourselves. Up until this point, the Jews have waited for God. They have been so downtrodden. It even says in the two parshas ago, they couldn't pay attention properly to Moses because they were so overworked that they couldn't see their way out. We probably know how this is. And what the rabbis are saying is that unless they got into that water and then became dry, they had to be wet before they could cross. They had to engage somehow actively in the transmission of this miracle. And so we have Nachshon, we have the leadership, and finally the sea splits and the people walk across. I want just briefly to show you a couple of lovely images of this, which I think will illuminate. Here we have Moses holding his hand out, and here we have perhaps Nachshon being let into the sea, the people with their challah, with their matzah on their heads, looking out over the sea, and here's our pillar of smoke. And the sea is all wild and splitting and protecting these people. And here we have Moses opening the sea for the people and the dry land with the walls of the ocean on either side. I'm going to go quickly through these next ones. Here we have the people crossing the sea. You can see on either side, they've got their burdens with them. And here is another picture of them exclaiming at the crossing, Egypt behind, and what is ahead of them, unknown. So you have this concept that they really stayed kind of dry as they were going through, but that Pharaoh's army was the one that ended up, once again, getting wet. In the text, it says that as Pharaoh's army went into this dry land, which as you see is quite narrow, at least according to our visual imagery, and as they went in, their wheels slowed down and they got stuck in the mud. You can imagine it's the sea bottom. And they were wet. They got stuck in that mud and they were unable to come out and to move. And it is at that point that the Jews got all the way across and the waves are commanded to go over and they are drowned. This is not what the Jews see. And this is so fascinating because in the text, when we look at Shirat Hayam, the song that they sing at the end, they say that Pharaoh's horses and chariots drown in the sea like stones, like lead, sinking to the bottom. So somehow their perception is different than the reality. It's not that you never saw them again because the waves closed over them, end of story. It's that they were somehow on the top, or they floated to the top and then they sank in. And I would like to suggest that this reflects the Jews' first moment of being able to see the mystery of what is going on. Because this whole time they've been managing, but going along with what Moses said. They get to the other side and they dance, they sing, they say Michamocha. Finally, for the first time, there have been plagues of blood and flies and all this right next to them. And they still have not been able to acknowledge the divine. And it's only after they've gotten wet, they've crossed the sea, and they've envisioned a new end to their torment. That it is not that it has gone from their sight miraculously, but that it has been hurled into the sea, that it falls, that there is an active moment in there where they transform this experience into something bigger. And when they do, they suddenly get, oh, psychologically, this is not just a little thing. We have not just gotten free of Egypt. We are completely free of our oppressions, and we can move forward in a new way. And so when they realize this, they break out for the first time in song. And we have this other lovely midrash, this is probably my favorite everywhere, that says that the wombs of pregnant mothers became transparent as they sang. And they were all able to look out, and in looking out over the ocean at their sunken oppressors and at the other side that they no longer had to live in, they no longer were slaves. And that moment, they truly saw God. They truly became aware of the nature of the divine. And they sang, Mi chamocha, who is like you among all the other gods? You are it, we are yours, you are ours. And so my message for this week is that whenever we're going through a hard time, be it slavery or COVID or an illness or a paper that's just not right in itself, no matter how hard we try, whatever our hardship is, there are three things that we need to remember. One is listen when you need to be prepared. Have that bread ready. Bring your stuff with you. Take what you need for the journey. Be prepared. Two is get wet. Dip your toes in the water. The only way you're going to get through it is by jumping in. And when you jump in, often miraculously, it opens up in front of you. And the third one is the hardest, perhaps. See God. Allow the divine to be part of your progress. Allow the divine, as we hear in Exodus, to protect you on the lintels of your house, to protect you in the smoke and the flame and the fire around you in chaos, to protect you as you go through the sea with the whales and the sharks, and to show God's face to you when you get through whatever that is, when we get through whatever this is, so that we may all rejoice. And these moments are big, and these moments are little, and we always have this opportunity. So remember, be prepared, get wet, and see God.